The story begins on a clear summer afternoon in Maplewood, Virginia, the kind of day where the air feels alive with warmth. The sky is painted a flawless blue, and sunlight spills across the neatly trimmed lawns of a neighborhood that prides itself on perfection. Families were outside mowing grass. Children rode their bikes up and down the cul-de-sacs, and there was an unspoken agreement among the homeowners. Order, uniformity, and control were the cornerstones of their peace. But that illusion of control was about to be tested, because on that afternoon, a moving truck pulled up to the bright orange two-story house at the edge of the street. It was the only house on that block not under the jurisdiction of the Maplewood Homeowners Association. And as the first boxes were carried onto the porch, whispers began traveling across lawns and through half-closed windows. Someone new was moving in. Someone from the outside, and that someone was me. My name is Daniel Hayes, and when I bought the house, I knew exactly what I was doing. I wanted space, privacy, and the freedom to live, without some committee dictating what color I could paint my shutters or how tall my grass could be. The irony was that the house I chose sat right next door to the HOA's Crown Jewel Street, the one overseen by the woman who considered herself queen of the neighborhood, Karen Whitmore. She saw me before I even noticed her. While I was unloading boxes, she appeared at the edge of her yard, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her nose like a judge's gavel about to drop. Her posture screamed authority, and her eyes scanned every detail as though she were taking inventory of what I owned. I gave her a polite nod, trying to avoid immediate conflict, but she didn't nod back. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice cutting through the hum of cicadas. You can't just park that truck there. This street has rules. I glanced up, wiping the sweat off my forehead. Afternoon. I'm just unloading. Shouldn't take too long. She tilted her head sharply. Not the point. The HOA requires permits for move-ins. And those boxes, she gestured toward my porch, can't sit out overnight. I let out a small laugh, thinking she was joking. Well, lucky for me, I'm not part of the HOA. The silence that followed was heavy. Her face tightened, and I swear for a second the color drained from her skin. Excuse me? She asked, voice sharp. My house isn't in your HOA, I explained calmly. I checked before buying. This property is outside your jurisdiction. Her jaw clenched, and her sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose. Behind them, her eyes blazed with disbelief and fury. For Karen, the idea that someone could live next door yet escape her iron grip was unthinkable. She took a step back, trying to recover her composure, but her words betrayed her anger. We'll see about that, she hissed. Everyone on this street follows the rules. Everyone. I watched her march back toward her immaculate white house, her heels clicking against the sidewalk like a judge hammering down a verdict. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the moment Karen declared war. That night, as I unpacked, I noticed movement outside my window. Karen was standing across the street with a clipboard, writing something down. Every few minutes, she would look up at my house, scribble furiously, then shake her head. She was cataloging me like I was some infestation that needed exterminating. The next morning, I woke up to find a letter taped to my door. It wasn't from the city, and it wasn't an official notice. It was from Karen. The letter was typed, but the tone was unmistakably hers. It read, Dear neighbor, welcome to Maplewood. As the head of our homeowners association, I wanted to remind you of the community standards we all abide by. Please ensure your lawn is maintained to regulation height. Refrain from storing visible boxes or furniture outdoors. And note that exterior paint must fall within our approved palette. Your current choice of color may need to be addressed. Consider this your first and only courtesy notice. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I read it twice and laughed out loud. She was already trying to rope me into her web. But instead of throwing the letter away, I taped it to my refrigerator as a reminder. I didn't move here to be controlled. By day 3, Karen escalated. She brought over 2 other HOA board members, an older man named Greg and a soft-spoken woman named Linda. They stood at the edge of my driveway like an impromptu tribunal. Karen did all the talking. Daniel, she began, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. We understand you think you're not in the HOA, but this street has always been managed by us. Everyone contributes to the upkeep of our community. It's only fair you do the same. I leaned against my car, arms crossed. I've read the deed. I've seen the property lines. My house isn't in your HOA, so with respect, your rules don't apply here. Greg shifted uncomfortably, clearly not wanting to be there. Linda looked down at her shoes. But Karen? She doubled down. If you live here, you live under our rules. If you resist, you'll find this neighborhood very inhospitable. Her threat hung in the air, subtle but clear. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was about control. That evening, I overheard her on the phone while she stood outside. She was pacing, voice raised. He thinks he's above us. He thinks he can just ignore the HOA. I'll show him. I'll make his life miserable until he leaves. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Days turned into weeks, and Karen's campaign against me grew bolder. One morning, I found anonymous complaints stuffed in my mailbox. Accusations that my grass was too tall, that my recycling bins weren't stored properly, that my car was an eyesore. None of it was true, but the message was clear. Karen was trying to wear me down. Then came the police. It was a Saturday afternoon when I heard the sirens. 2 squad cars pulled up in front of my house. Officers stepped out, hands resting casually on their belts. I walked outside, confused. "Sir," one officer said, "we got a call about a disturbance. Claims of illegal construction on your property." I blinked. "Construction?" "I'm unpacking boxes." The officer glanced around. "That's what it looks like." Behind them, I saw Karen standing on her porch, arms crossed, smiling smugly like she had just summoned reinforcements. She waved at the officers as if she were their commanding officer. "Is this her doing?" I asked quietly. The officer sighed. "We get calls from her frequently. Don't worry. You're not in violation of anything." But that wasn't the point. Karen wanted to show me she could summon authority with a single phone call. She wanted to embarrass me, to send a message to the whole street that I didn't belong. The officers left and I went back inside, but the incident only steeled my resolve. If Karen thought she could bully me out of my own home, she was mistaken. Because what she didn't know was that I had grown up dealing with people like her, people who thrived on control, who pushed and pushed until someone finally pushed back, and I wasn't about to fold. Still, the harassment continued. Cars would slow down in front of my house, neighbors staring like I was some dangerous outsider. Someone dumped a bag of trash across my driveway. A letter arrived claiming I owed dues to the HOA, a fraudulent invoice with Karen's signature at the bottom. And yet with each stunt, Karen grew more desperate. She wanted compliance, but what she was really revealing was her obsession. One night, Mrs. Carter, the elderly neighbor who had lived there long before Karen moved in, came by with a pie. She knocked softly, glancing around as though she didn't want to be seen. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, "but I just wanted to say—" "Don't let her scare you. Karen's been running this place like her own kingdom for years. Most of us are too afraid to stand up to her. But you're different. You're not under her thumb, and that terrifies her." Her words stuck with me. It wasn't just about me anymore. Karen wasn't just trying to control one neighbor. She had been ruling over everyone. And my refusal to bend was exposing her power for what it was, an illusion. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. I stepped outside to water my plants when I found Karen standing in my yard, phone in hand, snapping photos of my porch. "Karen," I called out, "what exactly are you doing?" She didn't flinch. "Documenting violations. You'll be fined." I couldn't help but laugh. "Fined? By who?" "You don't own me. You don't rule me." Her face turned red, and her voice rose into a shrill scream that echoed down the street. "You can't live here. You don't belong here. This is my neighborhood." Windows opened. Neighbors peeked out. And in that moment, the mask slipped. The calm, collected president of the HOA was gone. What remained was raw fury, the desperate cry of someone who realized her control was slipping away. That was the day I decided. If Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. And it was only just beginning. The moment Karen screamed those words, "You can't live here!" something shifted in the neighborhood. It was as if a curtain had been pulled back, revealing the truth everyone already suspected but was too afraid to acknowledge. Neighbors lingered by their windows, watching her unravel. A few shook their heads. Others whispered behind half-closed blinds. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. Karen realized it too. Her face drained as she noticed the stares, the quiet judgment from the very people she claimed to represent. She turned sharply, storming back to her porch, slamming the door behind her. But damage had been done. Later that evening, I was sitting in my living room when I heard a knock. It was Greg, one of the HOA board members who had stood beside Karen weeks earlier during her attempt to welcome me. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. "Look," he began, "I shouldn't even be here. But what she did today, it wasn't right. She's been president for years, and truth is, most of us just let her run things. But the way she went after you, that wasn't about the HOA. That was personal." I studied his face, searching for sincerity. "Then why doesn't anyone stop her?" I asked. Greg sighed. "Because she's relentless. She'll bury you in complaints, drag you through meetings, make life miserable until you give in. It's easier to just nod and obey. But with you, you're outside her reach. That scares her." His words confirmed what Mrs. Carter had told me earlier. I wasn't just her enemy. I was her worst nightmare, proof that her power had limits. And people were starting to see it. The following week, Karen escalated again. I came home to find "for sale" spray painted in red across my garage door. She wanted me gone, and she wanted everyone to know it. I called the police, and when the officer arrived, he looked almost embarrassed. "Let me guess," he muttered. "This has something to do with your neighbor, Mrs. Whitmore?" I nodded. The officer sighed. "We've had complaints from her about just about everyone." "But this is vandalism. If you want to press charges, we'll investigate." I glanced across the street. Karen was standing there on her porch, arms crossed, daring me to act. I shook my head. "Not yet. Let her dig her own hole." Because by now I understood something crucial. Karen thrived on conflict. She wanted me to lash out, to lose my temper, to give her ammunition. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I decided to fight her with patience, with strategy, and with truth. And truth has a way of spreading. Mrs. Carter invited me to a small get-together one evening. Just a few neighbors, nothing official. Over lemonade and cookies, people began to talk. At first, it was hesitant. Small complaints, little stories of Karen's nitpicking. But once the dam broke, it all came pouring out. "She fined me for having a garden gnome," one man admitted. "She told me my car wasn't aesthetically appropriate," another woman said. "She called the cops on my son for skateboarding," someone else added. The more they spoke, the more I realized Karen's reign wasn't one of respect, but of fear, and now that fear was starting to fade. I listened, then spoke carefully. "She can't control me, and she can't keep controlling you if you stand together. But you have to decide. Are you willing to stop being afraid?" There was a long silence. Then Mrs. Carter's frail voice cut through. "It has to end!" The tide was turning. Karen must have sensed it too, because she made her boldest move yet. A week later, I woke to find a notice taped to my door, but this one wasn't just a letter. It was an official-looking document, complete with a fake seal, claiming I had been legally annexed into the HOA. It demanded immediate payment of $200 in dues. I laughed at the absurdity, but I also knew it was fraud. She had crossed a line. I called Officer Miller, the one who had handled most of her complaints. When he arrived, I showed him the document. He whistled low. "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is forgery. If she made this, she's in real trouble." We walked across the street together. Karen was in her yard, pruning her rose bushes like nothing was wrong. When she saw us approach, her eyes narrowed. "Karen," the officer said, "we need to talk." Her composure cracked for a second. "About what?" "The notice you taped to Daniel's door," he replied firmly. "Did you make this?" She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, it's just a formality. Everyone contributes around here. He should too." The officer held the paper up. "This is fraud, ma'am. You're impersonating an official document. That's a crime." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. But true to form, she doubled down. "He doesn't belong here. He's ruining everything. If he won't follow the rules, then I'll make him." The officer stepped closer. "That's not how the law works. If this continues, charges will be filed." Karen's hands trembled as she dropped her pruning shears. She looked at me, her face contorted with rage and desperation. "You don't get it, do you? This is my neighborhood, mine!" But her voice cracked, and the words didn't carry the same power they once did. Neighbors had gathered again, drawn by the confrontation. They watched as their so-called leader unraveled in public, her control slipping through her fingers like sand. From that day forward, everything changed. Complaints stopped. Anonymous letters ceased. The police visits ended. Karen had been warned, and though she still glared at me from across the street, she knew she was outmatched. Her power came from intimidation, and I had taken that away. Weeks later, I received another knock at my door. This time it was Linda, the soft-spoken board member who had once stood beside Karen. She held a folded piece of paper. "We voted her out," Linda said quietly. "She's no longer president." I unfolded the paper. It was a letter signed by nearly every member of the HOA, declaring that Karen was removed from her position effective immediately. They had finally had enough. I looked across the street. Karen's blinds were drawn, her yard overgrown, her once pristine house slowly slipping into disarray. Without power, she had withered. Linda hesitated, then asked, "Why did you stand up to her? You could have just moved away?" I thought about it. About the endless letters, the vandalism, the police visits. About Mrs. Carter's trembling voice, Greg's quiet confession. The neighbors who had lived in fear for too long. "Because bullies don't stop until someone makes them," I said simply. And it wasn't just about me. It was about all of you. The neighborhood was never the same after that. People began planting flowers they actually liked instead of what was approved. Kids played freely. Without Karens, watchful eyes reporting them. Even the air seemed lighter, as if the entire street had taken its first deep breath in years. As for Karen, she became a ghost. She rarely came outside, and when she did, she avoided everyone. The woman who once screamed that she owned the neighborhood had lost everything. Not because of me alone, but because her neighbors finally saw the truth. Looking back, I realized I didn't just move into a house. I moved into a battle that exposed how fragile control really is when it's built on fear. And in the end, it only took one house, one homeowner beyond her reach, to bring her empire down. So when I sit on my porch now, watching the sun set over Maplewood, I can't help but smile. Because every laugh, every child's bike left in a driveway, every lawn painted with individuality is proof of what we all learned. No matter how loud she screamed, no matter how hard she tried, Karen never ruled here.